I've been on the carnivore diet for nearly 3 years now, and in recent times I've made a major change to my diet based on a new study that's just come out. So today I'll show you my new 2 go-to meals and explain what the study found and why it changed the way I do carnivore. Without further ado, let's get this first meal cooking. First up on the menu, and arguably the most important aspect of this meal, well, top 2 at least, is the steak. Today we've got a nice rump steak. Now, because I eat like our ancestors did, I also like to cook the way that they cooked. So let's chuck the steak in the air fryer, put the meat thermometer through it, and get this thing cooking. We're gonna go steak, medium rare, start. We're also gonna cook up some eggs. Now, for me personally, I like my eggs nice and crispy, so I wait for this pan to get really hot. You know it's ready when you chuck water on the pan and the balls go everywhere. Tallow. The only downside to this is when you put the cooking fats on the pan, they kind of splatter everywhere. So you do kind of have to make sure you stay at Steph Curry range at all times. Now we're going to turn it down slightly, and by slightly I mean about mild heat, mid-heat. Then a bit of water in the pan, chuck it on like that so it steams up nicely. And that is the first part of the meal done. Just had intel in that our steak is also ready. Oh my goodness. Alrighty, now it's time for the moment of truth. Take the probe out, smooth transferal onto a plate. Look at that. That right there is meal number 1. Our ancestors may not have cooked this way, but they certainly weren't getting steaks this perfect every time. The next meal is a little more complex than this, but let's first sit down and break down the study. Since reading this study and making a big change to my carnivore diet, I've actually noticed some massive differences. What the study looked at was how much protein do you actually need to be eating, which is very important. A lot of people think protein is only for building muscle, but protein is actually the building block of our entire bodies. You and I essentially are proteins, whether it be our skin cells, the cells that make up our organs, or literally any other cell in the body for that matter. It is made from protein. So making sure you have enough protein is super important. Now, it's very hard to calculate how much protein you need for optimal day-to-day function, such as building these cells, enzymes, and hormones. This is because there is no real metric to look at. You don't have a tangible thing such as the level of a certain hormone that you can actually precisely measure. So in order to calculate how much protein is optimal for day-to-day function, it's easiest to look at long-term muscle growth studies. The reason for this is because maximum muscle growth can only occur once the body's other protein requirements are fully met. Before any protein can be used to build new muscle, the body must first take care of essential daily functions. This is non-negotiable. If protein intake is too low, the body will always prioritize these vital functions over muscle growth. So, by looking at long-term muscle growth studies, we can determine what is the minimum amount of protein we need by looking at what level of protein results in muscle growing not as fast as it otherwise could, as well as the maximum amount that we can use by looking at where muscle growth plateaus. The study we're looking at today is what is referred to as a meta-analysis study, which is essentially a study on studies. In meta-analyses, they get all the studies on a given topic and essentially combine all of the data. Now, there are some obvious limitations of these studies, as they pull data from research that doesn't always use the same methods or control the same variables. So the results are never going to be perfect. But as a whole, due to the sheer quantity of data they look at, they're as good as you're going to get. Now the results of this study are wild. Even if you aren't someone who is trying to build muscle, this might make you reconsider your protein intake. This study actually looked at 62 different long-term studies on how much protein you need for optimal muscle growth. Here is what they found. Across every study done with only 2 outliers removed for extreme results, they found that there was very little difference across total protein consumption in terms of muscle growth. I know, it's crazy, right? You would think the more protein the better, but the amount of protein actually required is much lower than what I and many others originally thought. One other important thing to consider is that these studies were looking at people's total protein intake, not just protein intake from animal sources such as meat. This is very important. due to something known as the DIAS index. DIAS stands for Digestible Indispensable Amino Acid Score, which really is just a fancy way of saying, is this protein good? The higher the score a protein source gets, the better humans are able to absorb and use that source of protein. As you can see for yourself, plant protein is very ineffective, but animal protein is a very high quality protein. So really, someone who gets all of their protein from meat is actually able to utilize a lot more of this protein than someone who gets the same amount of protein but not all of it from animal sources. When I saw this study, I immediately dropped my protein intake. Previously, I was eating around 200 to 250 grams of protein per day. But recently I've been experimenting with around 150 grams of protein per day, with a lot more dietary fat. And for reference, I weigh roughly 165 pounds or 76 kilograms. Now, why did I do this, you might be wondering? What's wrong with extra protein? Well, there is nothing wrong with extra protein, but I would rather allocate more of the total energy I am consuming to dietary fats. For one, fats are our primary energy source on Carnivore. When you remove carbohydrates from your diet, fat becomes your body's primary fuel source. Our bodies are much more effective at using dietary fats for energy than they are at using protein. So more fat and less protein should, in theory, give me more energy throughout the day. Shortly I'll discuss whether or not this has actually happened in reality. Secondly, fats are the building block for our hormones. Almost all of our major hormones, especially the ones that control mood, energy, strength, and metabolism, are made from cholesterol and fatty acids. Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, cortisol, and even vitamin D all come from cholesterol, which is much more abundant in fat rather than lean muscle meat. So if you do not give your body enough dietary fat, you are giving it fewer raw materials to build these hormones. When you give your body the fats it is designed to run on, it can finally produce and regulate hormones the way it's meant to. This is why people often notice a better mood, stronger libido, deeper sleep, and more stable energy when they increase their fat intake on Carnivore. Fat is also incredibly therapeutic. It has been shown to support the nervous system, calm inflammation, and stabilize blood sugar. Interestingly, it is clearly demonstrated in the literature that when people go on low-fat diets, they often run into mental health issues. Then on the flip side, there are Harvard psychiatrists such as Dr. Chris Palmer and Dr. Georgia Ede, who report that a high-fat ketogenic diet is more effective for treating mental health issues than every drug ever made. This makes sense as the brain not only runs on fats, but is actually built from fat. About 60% of the human brain is fat, and the cell membranes, the outer protective layer of every brain cell, and every cell in your body for that matter, are made from cholesterol and fatty acids. Cholesterol actually makes up 50% by weight and total volume of every cell membrane in your body. As mentioned earlier, dietary fats and the cholesterol contained in them are also the building blocks of essentially all of our key hormones. So dietary fats provide both the fuel and raw building materials the brain needs. As I also mentioned earlier, excess protein isn't really that useful. It is largely converted to sugar for your body to use as a fuel source, but this is an ineffective process. Your body is much more efficient at using dietary fats for energy. Since I've gone higher fat and lower protein, I've noticed a few rather drastic changes. For one, I'm a lot less hungry when cutting down than I have been in prior years, and that includes the last couple of years where I was also doing carnivore but just eating higher protein and lower fats. I've also noticed that I have much more energy. After eating these much higher fat meals than I would in the past, I feel much more energized, and this energy is a lot more consistent throughout the day. I don't have as many ups and downs, it's a lot more stable. Not that it was super up and down in the past, but I just do notice that my energy is a lot more stable after these high fat meals. One of my friends, Robert Sykes, also did an experiment like this. Robert has followed a ketovore and carnivore style diet for nearly 10 years. He's a lifetime natural bodybuilder and is one of the most jacked natural athletes I've ever seen. Here is what he found when he dropped his protein down to only 75 to 85 grams per day and pushed his fats up to around 400 grams per day. Over just 2 weeks, his results were insane. His total testosterone jumped from 334 nanograms per deciliter to 696, effectively doubling. His free testosterone went from 27.8 nanograms per deciliter to 58.7, also nearly doubling. And despite eating an extra 1,000 calories per day, his weight stayed stable or even trended down, showing a clear increase in metabolic rate. In my opinion, as a whole, there is one major takeaway all of us carnivores should take from the study, and that is that we should put even more of an emphasis on fat. Having extra dietary fat is a great thing. The benefits of dietary fats go on and on. So if we instead allocate more of our total energy intake towards fats, that is something that is seriously ideal. So, how much fat and protein should you really be eating? Well, I really like Professor Bart K's recommendation for people on carnivore. and that is whatever you would weigh being very lean in kilograms, times it by 2. So aim for 2 grams of protein per day per kilogram you would be very lean, which is equivalent to about 0.9 grams of protein per pound. Then eat animal fats to satiety. Ideally at the very low end, you want to be consuming at least the same amount of fat in total grams per day as you are protein. But for many you will find you do even better with a much higher fat intake than this. And for those who like things visually, this is roughly what a steak looks like when it has the same amount of grams of fat and protein. So a 1-to-1 ratio of fat and protein. 80-20 ground beef is also roughly a 1-to-1 ratio. And this is what a steak looks like when it has twice as many grams of fat as it does protein. So a 2-to-1 fat to protein ratio. I do think that we're all slightly different in the exact ratios of fat to protein that we'll do best on. The amount of fat that is best for you may be vastly different to what is best for someone else. So at the end of the day, I think it is simply best to just listen to your own intuition and experiment. If you notice you're craving more fat, eat more fat. If you aren't craving more fat, then maybe you don't need to change your fat consumption at all. However, what I have noticed and what a lot of other people I've talked to notice is that they generally feel a lot better when they consume more dietary fats. And with this new study showing us that maybe we don't need as much protein as we originally thought. For me personally, I'm going to stick to this higher fat and lower protein approach. Anyways, that's enough yapping from me. Time to head back to the kitchen and put on a generational cooking performance. Alrighty, we're back for meal number 2. This one here is a little more complicated, but in saying that, I mean, it's a carnivore meal, so how complicated can it be really? First things first, we're gonna chuck in a couple of high-fat beef patties. Now, I don't do many promotions on my channel, simply because most products are complete garbage, and I refuse to promote to a single person a product that does not monumentally enhance their life. But this air fryer is so brilliant that I reached out to them to get you a code so you guys could get one at a discounted price. This thing can cook everything from steaks that are finished in minutes to roasts that need to be slow cooked. My favorite feature is the inbuilt meat thermometer, which means at the click of a button I get perfectly cooked steaks every single time. So if you want perfect steaks like this every single time, I highly recommend you head over to tasty.net. There's also another link where you can purchase from Amazon. They've got their Christmas sale on now, and if you use my code MXGM, you get $40 off, and if you purchase through their website, you'll get a free holiday gift set with a silicone tong, 30-piece paper liners, a cutlery set, and an exclusive digital holiday cookbook featuring incredible carnivore recipes from your favorite carnivore creators. If you place your order this week, you will get your Tasty air fryer before Christmas. Thanks to Tasty for making videos like these possible. You know things are serious when we're whipping out the low angle. First up, we've got some good high quality bacon. Straight from the local butcher. This stuff doesn't have 100 ingredients like other bacons do. Then we're going to get some more high-fat beef mince in the pan. Now, would a wiser man than me scramble their eggs before putting them in the pan? Absolutely not, because they wouldn't be wiser if they had to do an extra dish. Bang, bang. Chuck some cheese on. Oh my goodness. Look at the power in that meal. This is why they call this thing the Power Bowl. Now it's time to check on the patties. Oh my days. And that right there is meal number 2, the Power Bowl with some beef patties, an absolute classic. None of my recipes may have made the Tasty Carnivore cookbook this year, but I reckon with some more performances like this, next year every second recipe is going to be my recipe. Brackets, this isn't even my recipe, I got it from Kerry Homestead House. Shout out Kerry, thanks Kerry, I do enjoy this meal, I gotta say. Anyways, that's how I'm eating nowadays, lower protein with a lot more fat, and so far I feel incredible. See you next time.